I'm not someone who panics easily. I've always believed in breathing through the moment, collecting details, and never giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. But the moment I stepped back into the office after lunch that day, something was off. The kind of off that settles in your gut before your mind can even find words for it. My name is Mia. I'm 28 years old. And what happened in the following hours would shatter every illusion I had about fairness, loyalty, and the game people play behind your back when they think you're not watching. I had only been gone for 45 minutes, just a quick break. Nothing out of the ordinary. A salad from the cafe across the street and a walk to clear my head. When I came back through the glass doors of our department, I noticed two men standing by my desk, suits, the type that never smiled unless they smelled blood. Compliance officers. They wore that polished stiffness that made everyone else freeze in place, the kind of quiet that spreads faster than a fire alarm dot at first. I thought maybe they were in the wrong department, or that maybe they were just doing a routine audit. But then I saw the drawer of my desk wide open, then the file cabinet, then my personal bag sitting beside the chair unzipped, and suddenly it wasn't just off, it was deliberate. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, keeping my tone measured, almost pleasant. One of them looked up, startled that I'd returned, as if they weren't expecting to be caught mid-search. "Miss Harper?" "Yes, we're performing a routine compliance inspection." Just standard. Standard procedure. Since when did standard involve rifling through someone's personal belongings without notice or request for consent? "I see," I said calmly. I didn't blink, I didn't twitch. I simply walked over to the desk and placed my half-empty smoothie on the corner like it was just another Tuesday. But inside, I was already building the timeline in my head. Who ordered this? Why me? And more urgently, what were they hoping to find? That's when I noticed Jenna, 2 cubicles away, watching with the kind of stillness only guilt brings. Everyone else was pretending to be immersed in spreadsheets, eyes glued to monitors that hadn't changed in minutes. But Jenna? She wasn't pretending. She wasn't blinking either. She knew exactly what was happening, because she made it happen. I didn't need a confession. I'd seen the signs for weeks. The fake compliments about my work. The questions she didn't need to ask but asked anyway, like what time I usually stepped out, or if I ever kept sensitive client files at my desk for convenience. She always had this sugary way of framing concern as kindness. But now, the mask had slipped, and I saw it for what it was, a setup. One of the officers pulled out a small USB stick from a manila envelope tucked into my drawer. "What's this?" he asked. I leaned forward and examined it. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. But I didn't flinch. "Not sure," I said. "But if you're implying it belongs to me, you might want to double-check chain of custody." My drawer was locked when I left. The other officer glanced at his partner. A quick, silent exchange passed between them, and I knew then they were just doing their jobs. But even they weren't comfortable with what they were finding. Something didn't smell right. Still, I kept my voice even. "You said this was a routine inspection. Do routine inspections usually involve searching employee belongings without prior notification?" Again, silence. They knew the answer. I took a slow breath and sat in my chair, folding my hands neatly on my lap. "Well, gentlemen, I'll let you finish your inspection. Let me know if you find anything interesting." They didn't reply. They kept searching, but their hands moved slower now, more cautious, as if they sensed they'd stepped into something much bigger than a USB stick or a planted file dot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message from a friend in another department. "Jenna said you were in trouble. What's going on?" I didn't reply. Instead, I looked over at Jenna again. She had turned back to her screen, pretending to type, pretending she hadn't just tried to destroy my career in one lunchtime window. But she had made one critical mistake. She underestimated me. She thought I would panic, that I would cry, that I would make a scene. She thought she could corner me with a lie and then slip away before the consequences caught up. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I already suspected her. I'd been building a case of my own quietly, carefully, for weeks. That USB, it wouldn't be the only thing they found. and the story she crafted around it would unravel faster than she ever imagined. But I said nothing. I smiled politely, and I waited. There's a special kind of calm that settles in your chest when someone tries to destroy you and fails. It's not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic screams. It arrives like fog, slowly, silently, and with finality. That's what I felt as I sat there watching the compliance officers shuffle through my drawers, trying to make sense of what they had found. They wanted this to be routine, but even they were starting to realize it wasn't. I knew exactly who tipped them off. Jenna. I'd known for weeks, months, actually. She'd been circling me like a vulture in designer heels ever since I was shortlisted for the senior consultant position. The same position she had hinted, not so subtly, would finally even the playing field between us. As if success were something that had to be rationed. As if I hadn't earned every late night, every impossible client, every glowing evaluation. She didn't want the role. She wanted me not to have it, but Jenna was smarter than most snakes. She didn't strike openly. She smiled, complimented my outfits, laughed at my jokes in meetings. She played the long game. Casual sabotage disguised as camaraderie. You left your login screen open yesterday, Mia. Just wanted to let you know. We wouldn't want someone accessing your files, right? I saw that weird guy hanging around your car. Do you think maybe you're being followed? Little. Comments sprinkled in like poison and tea dots, so when I walked into my workspace and saw the compliance team already waist deep in my private folders and locked drawers, I wasn't shocked. Not really. Because 2 days before I had noticed something. Someone had moved my mouse. Now, that might sound insignificant, but I'm meticulous. I leave everything exactly where I want it. And that day, when I came back from the printer, my mouse was slightly off-center. Just enough for me to know someone had sat at my desk. That's when I started watching more closely. Set up the hidden camera in the corner of the bookshelf. And sure enough, within 3 days, I caught Jenna snooping. She didn't find what she was looking for. So she planted it, the USB they had just found, the one that supposedly contained confidential data I shouldn't have had access to. I never touched it, but I'd seen her with it on the footage. She slipped it into my drawer after hours, probably thinking it would be discovered on one of her anonymous tips. It would be her word against mine. A clean little takedown. Except I don't play checkers. I play chess, and she was 5 moves behind. Miss Harper, one of the compliance officers said slowly, holding up the USB. Do you mind explaining this? I would love to, I said, keeping my expression neutral. But I prefer to do so with legal present. That made them blink. They weren't expecting that. I watched their discomfort rise like steam from hot pavement. They weren't here to take me down. They were here because they were sent a request from upper management based on an anonymous complaint, one they were now starting to doubt. Meanwhile, Jenna was pretending to be engrossed in a spreadsheet she hadn't touched since before lunch. I could feel her pulse from across the room. Her nervous energy was practically buzzing through the air. She thought this would be quick, that I'd cry, that I'd beg, but instead I stood up. I'd also like to request that the footage from the security cameras be preserved from the past 72 hours, I added. Specifically the after-hours feed from this floor. Now that got their attention. The taller of the two turned toward me fully. Do you believe someone tampered with your workstation? I'm saying, I replied calmly, that there's more context here than a flash drive and an accusation. I didn't say your name. I didn't need to. The suspicion was already shifting. The head of HAR was called down. A crowd was forming. Subtly, people pretending to walk past to grab things, from printers to refill coffee. But they were listening, watching, whispering. Jenna stood up. I didn't even know there was an investigation, she said too quickly. I didn't say there was one, I replied, eyes fixed on her now. Funny that you did. And that was it. That was the moment. The mask slipped. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at the HR director, who was now narrowing his eyes. I picked up my phone. One message, footage backed up. Ready when you are, and I smiled, because everything she tried to do, Everything she whispered into the ears of managers, hinted at in emails, planted in people's minds, it was all about to collapse. I knew who called them. I knew why. And she was about to learn. You don't bring fake weapons to a real war. From the moment they stepped into my office, I could tell they weren't just looking around. They were searching. That's the thing about guilt. When someone walks into a room expecting to find something damning, they don't waste time pretending otherwise. Their movements become frantic, focused, desperate, and these two compliance officers were no exception. They weren't looking for policy violations. They were looking for evidence, specifically, something that would validate the anonymous report that triggered their visit. They were looking for exactly what Jenna told them they'd find. She didn't. Stop at planting the USB? No. Gemma had laid out an entire narrative that I was stealing confidential data, storing sensitive contracts on unauthorized flash drives, even creating altered copies of client agreements to benefit certain parties. It was clever in a way that made my skin crawl. She used buzzwords that would set off every red flag in a corporate compliance department: intellectual property breach, client confidentiality, unauthorized access. Words designed not to prove guilt, but to create just enough suspicion to justify an invasive search, and she played it well. Because she knew that I worked long hours, that I often took projects home, that I accessed files across departments, all perfectly legal, but easy to spin as suspicious if you chose the right tone. She knew how to make it look like something was off, especially if she could plant just one piece of false evidence to back up the story. I watched them dig through my locked drawer and find exactly what she'd hoped they would: the small, silver USB drive wedged between old receipts and a binder I hadn't touched in months. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just tilted my head like I'd never seen it before, because I hadn't. "Do you recognize this?" the taller one asked, holding it up between two gloved fingers. "No," I answered honestly. "But if you scan the fingerprint logs on the drawer, you'll find that I haven't opened that compartment since last quarter. Unless, of course, someone else accessed it." He paused. The other officer was already examining the USB, his brows tightening. Something wasn't adding up for him. And I could tell because it wasn't just about what they found. It was about how easily they had found it. Tidy evidence is a red flag in real investigations. Real data thieves aren't this clumsy. I knew they wouldn't find anything damaging on that drive because I'd already reviewed it the night before. After the camera footage revealed Jenna placing something inside my desk while wearing latex gloves, she thought she was being cautious. What she didn't realize was that I had anticipated this move. The moment I saw her on the footage, I entered the office after hours, opened the drawer, and found the USB. Instead of removing it, I cloned it, its contents. 2 client contracts, real ones, but with subtle differences. Adjusted figures, alternate dates, and signatures that looked almost legitimate, but not quite. And that was her biggest mistake. She didn't realize I drafted both of those original contracts. I knew the formatting quirks, the phrasing habits, and I would never write "best regards" in a final clause. Rookie mistake. Jenna had tried to fake my documents using older templates from shared folders. She hadn't counted on the metadata exposing the real author herself. Her employee ID was embedded in the document history, a timestamp from 3:22 a.m. 3 nights ago. She was sloppy, desperate, and her need to make it convincing had become her downfall. When the compliance officers asked for my password to access my computer files, I offered it willingly. "Be my guest," I said, "but you won't find anything that hasn't already been cleared by our legal team." They exchanged glances. Meanwhile, outside my office, I could hear the whispers starting to circulate. Word was spreading that something was happening in my office. Jenna stood just beyond the glass wall, trying to act disinterested, but her eyes were locked on that flash drive. I could practically hear her thoughts. Please find something. Please believe me. Please ruin her, but they wouldn't, because in less than 30 minutes, their quiet search had revealed 3 problems. A USB drive that shouldn't have been there. Tampered documents that didn't match the records. A drawer with a fingerprint. History that didn't include me for over a month. And I hadn't even shown them the footage yet. I leaned back in my chair as the compliance officer plugged the USB into their secure laptop, scanning it in silence. He frowned, tapped a few keys, then slowly turned to his colleague and whispered something I couldn't hear. They both stared at the screen for several seconds. Then finally, the taller one looked up. Double quotes Miss Harper. He said, carefully now, "Can you tell us if you've had any disputes with coworkers recently?" I didn't smile, not yet. But I looked him right in the eye and said, "If you mean personal vendettas disguised as concern for company policy, yes, one." It was the beginning of a shift, a slow unraveling. And for the first time, I could see them questioning everything. This wasn't about a random inspection anymore. It was about a setup. And they were starting to understand that they'd walked straight into the middle of someone else's petty revenge plot. So I let them search, let them dig. Because the more they searched, the deeper they'd find Jenna's fingerprints all over. Her own trap, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't interrupt them. Not once. Not when they started opening my file drawers without permission. Not when they pulled every labeled folder out of my cabinet and flipped through the contents like they were reading the script of a crime. I didn't even speak when one of them scanned my entire desktop while the other photographed the USB drive from multiple angles, probably to document their find. I let them because they were doing exactly what I needed them to do. Give me time to study their reactions, time to see the moment suspicion began to shift from me to someone else. And above all, time for the truth to set itself on fire. In their hands, their expressions said more than any words could have. What started as cold, mechanical duty turned into something more fragile, almost apologetic. One of them paused, holding the flash drive like it had started to burn. The other leaned closer to the laptop screen, squinting at the document logs. That's when the first shift happened. Whisper between them. Then one of them took out his company phone and typed something urgently. I knew that wasn't part of protocol. He wasn't reporting me, he was asking for help. I'd seen that look before. When someone realizes they're standing on the wrong side of a collapsing floor. That maybe they were just used, and maybe they just stepped into. A legal minefield they didn't know existed. They tried to maintain composure. Still clicking, still flipping, still scanning. But I could see the discomfort spreading like ink on wet paper. Then the shorter one cleared his throat. "Miss Harper, did you, by any chance, give anyone else access to your workstation recently?" There it was. The question they thought would trap me. But it only confirmed everything I already knew. I looked directly at them and replied with calm clarity. "No, but you might want to check Jenna Sullivan's badge access logs. I believe you'll find her time stamped here last Friday night, unofficially, and without my knowledge." Both of them froze because they had checked badge logs. I saw one of them doing it before they even opened my desk. It was routine, but they hadn't expected me to know. They hadn't expected me to be aware of how they operate, or how deeply I prepared for this. One of them stepped back and excused himself from the room. He didn't say where he was going, but I knew. He was heading straight to security to confirm what I just said. That left me alone with the other one. The quieter one, who kept glancing at the USB in his hand like it had betrayed him personally. I watched him pull up the metadata window. I could see it over the corner of my monitor. His eyes narrowed, then widened. The name, Jenna S. The creation date, 3:22 a.m. 3 nights ago. The folder path, temp J _Sullivan/contract _MODS. Double quotes. I didn't even need to speak. He turned toward me slowly, and for the first time that day, I saw regret in his eyes. "Mia," he started, then caught himself. "Miss Harper, I think we may have been misinformed." I didn't blink. "I think you've been used," I said quietly. "And I think it's time you stop working off anonymous reports and start asking the right people the right questions." There was a long pause, the kind that fills a room with more noise than sound ever could. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. "You look nervous in there. Everything okay?" The audacity made me laugh under my breath. I showed it to the officer still standing there. He read it, then looked at me. "I think it's best we pause this inspection," he said. "Oh no," I replied. "You can finish." But just so you know, I'll be making a full report to legal this afternoon, including video footage. That got his attention. Footage? I nodded. Of Jenna accessing this office after hours. Wearing gloves. Placing that drive in my desk. It's all backed up on a private server. Time-stamped, dated, authenticated. Silence again. He stood still for a long time, then walked over to the USB drive and gently unplugged it. He slipped it into a plastic evidence pouch, sealed it, and wrote something on the label. His pen shook slightly. The other officer returned. A few minutes later, I could tell by his face he confirmed my story. He didn't even sit down. "We'll be suspending this search," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Harper." I smiled, but only a little. "You're welcome." As they walked out of my office, I saw Jenna watching from the hallway again. This time she wasn't smiling. This time she looked pale. Her eyes darted between the USB pouch and my calm face. She could feel it slipping. Everything she'd built, the lies, the manipulation, the performance of being the victim, it was all crumbling. She turned away and stormed off. I watched her go, then quietly closed my office door. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race, because I hadn't just survived the ambush. I'd reversed it, and I wasn't finished yet. It started 6 months ago. A stapler moved an inch to the left, a file missing from my drawer. Login attempts on my desktop in the middle of the night, ones I could see listed in my system history, even if no one thought I'd notice. Small things, things that alone meant nothing. But together, they painted a picture. Not of paranoia, but of preparation. That's when I installed the camera. It wasn't anything fancy. A discreet black dot tucked behind my bookshelf, camouflaged by a few frame certifications and my favorite little bonsai tree. I told no one, not even HR. Especially not HR. Because if this was going to implode, I needed truth on my side. Not departmental discretion or watered-down versions of justice. The camera wasn't on all the time. Only during after hours. Only when I triggered it manually through a hidden app on my phone. Every Friday night before leaving the office, I activated it. And every Monday morning I reviewed what it saw. Most of the time, nothing. An empty room. Shadows shifting as cleaning staff moved in and out. But one Monday, the Monday after Jenna planted the drive, everything changed. At 2:46 a.m. The hallway lights flickered on. Jenna entered the frame. Alone. No coat, no hesitation. Like she had done it before, she moved directly to my desk, opened the top drawer, and placed something inside. She didn't rush. She wasn't nervous. That told me everything. She wanted it to be found. She wanted it to feel natural, to seem like it belonged there. She lingered for 2 minutes, scrolling on her phone, probably texting herself some pre-scripted nonsense to use as backup later. Then she walked out. No gloves. Number. Attempt to erase fingerprints. Just arrogance. That was her real mistake. She believed I wouldn't fight back, but I had already backed the footage up 3 times. Cloud, external SSD, and a USB drive I kept at my parents' house. Paranoid? Maybe. But when you work in legal compliance long enough, you learn that. People don't attack you when you're failing. They come for you when you're rising. And I'd been rising fast. The morning after the search, I walked into the conference room with legal. They already knew something was wrong, the compliance. Agents had flagged the report as inconclusive and submitted a private memo to upper management about irregularities. But I gave them more than suspicion. I gave them proof. Didn't speak much. Just opened my laptop, turned the screen, and hit play. Silence fell over the room. At the moment Jenna appeared on screen. One of the lawyers swore under her breath. The footage didn't need commentary. It told the whole story, the timing, the object, the intent, even the expression on Jenna's face as she tucked the incriminating drive into my drawer with smug precision. I paused it just as she looked, directly into the camera. Not because she saw it, she didn't, but because she looked too proud, too satisfied. That was the moment the room turned cold. "I have more," I said. "Backup copies, metadata logs, and I already submitted a sealed report to external counsel just in case this gets mishandled internally." No one argued. No one tried. to soften the edges because this wasn't workplace drama anymore. This was tampering, false accusation, malicious sabotage. And considering her connection to the board member, potential collusion, 2 hours later, Jenna was called into a separate meeting. She didn't know I was watching from down the hall. I saw her walking with her usual bounce. Saw her come out 30 minutes later, pale without her badge, escorted by security. No words, no goodbye, no more games. But the fallout wasn't over. By the end of the week, her father, Councilman Sullivan, quietly stepped down from the board. Official statement, health reasons. Internal memo, conflict of interest under review. Everyone knew what it meant, but no one said it out loud. And as for me, no one dared speak to me with anything less than complete respect. I wasn't just the girl from compliance anymore. I was the woman who kept the receipts, the one who knew when to stay quiet, when to watch, when to act. And now it was my turn to decide what came next. I thought for a moment that justice had been served, that the footage I presented, the proof I held in my hands, would be enough to let the truth carry itself. But then HR asked me to come in for an informal conversation. That's when I realized how far this was really going to go, and how much further I was willing to push back. The head of HR, Martin, sat across from me with a clipboard he didn't use and a fake smile that cracked slightly whenever I met his eyes. He started by thanking me for bringing the issue forward in such a professional manner. It was condescending, polished, designed to keep me calm, controlled, compliant. Then came the offer. Not directly, of course. They never phrase it that way. What he said was, "We think the best course of action here is to protect everyone's reputations." Everyone's as in Jenna's, her father's, the company's, not mine. Certainly not mine. We're prepared to offer you a private commendation for handling this maturely. And we'd like to discuss a lateral transfer to another branch, perhaps even a slight increase in base salary. I stared at him. Not a word, just the kind of silence that presses down on a room like gravity. He shifted, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "Are you suggesting I leave because I exposed a crime?" "No, not at all," he said too quickly. "We just believe the environment here has become strained. A fresh start could be." "A fresh start for who?" I asked. He didn't answer. Because the answer was them. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about one jealous coworker trying to ruin my name. This was about a system that protected its own rot. A structure built to reward silence and punish exposure. And I wasn't going to play along. So I said no. I left that room with my spine straight and my voice steady. But inside, I was shaking with a cold, focused fury. I went straight to my office, shut the door, and called Leah. Leah wasn't just my best friend. She was also a federal compliance lawyer who had handled several whistleblower cases. We'd gone to law school together, though I'd chosen corporate, and she'd chosen fire. She didn't hesitate. "Forward me everything," she said. "All the emails, all the footage, and don't delete a single call log." By the next morning, she had filed an official request under the Whistleblower Protection Act, not just internally but externally. We weren't dealing with internal politics anymore. This was legal terrain now. Dangerous for them. Powerful for me. HR tried to reach me again, this time with updated options. They were suddenly open to a promotional path, and company-wide acknowledgement. I refused every single one. I didn't want a promotion given out of fear. I didn't want a plaque. I wanted the truth, loud and public and irreversible. And Leah made sure that's exactly what happened. Within a week, we had formal statements submitted to the Department of Labor. The compliance agents who had searched my office were deposed under oath. They admitted they were given a tip with prearranged evidence, and that it had come from someone within upper HR. That's when the story broke. An industry blog, anonymous at first, posted the article. Penthouse office, planted, drives, and a whistleblower who didn't blink. It spread faster than I could track. People messaged me from other firms, from former employees, from women who'd been pushed out the same way, quietly, with pressure and compensation. I wasn't anonymous for long, but I didn't mind, because being seen, fully seen, is a risk. you take when you stand for something bigger than yourself. And I wasn't just standing anymore. I was burning their blueprint. 2 board members stepped down that quarter. A full audit was opened. Gemma's name was blacklisted across the industry. Not because I demanded it, but because the facts were undeniable. And Martin? He was quietly reassigned to another company branch. He lasted 3 weeks there before being dismissed. Rumor is he tried to handle something quietly again. This time, someone else had the camera daughters for me. They stopped offering promotions. They started asking. I didn't say yes. Not right away. Because power, I realized, wasn't in what they gave me. It was in what I now refused to take unless it was earned the right way. Changed the locks on more than just my office. I changed the rules. I remember the moment I hit send. There was no dramatic music, no trembling fingers. Just the quiet certainty that comes from knowing the tide has already turned and you're no longer drowning. I forwarded the full video file, along with every documented interaction, every timestamped access log in a PDF with annotations. I'd spent 2 sleepless nights organizing. It went to the legal department's general inbox and directly to the firm's external regulatory liaison. Within 12 hours, the entire building felt different. The morning after I sent the files, I walked into work to find that the usual buzz had flattened. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. HR was too quiet. Jenna's office door was closed. Martin's wasn't just closed. It was locked, and someone had taped a piece of printer paper over the nameplate. It read, "Meeting in progress," but I knew what it really meant. Fallout had begun by noon. I received an internal message from the legal team asking to speak at my earliest convenience. Not HR this time. Not middle management, legal. The real gatekeepers. When I stepped into the conference room, the air felt heavy. There were 3 people waiting, a senior compliance officer, a company attorney I had only seen in annual presentations, and someone from external counsel, likely to ensure neutrality. Their faces were unreadable, but their eyes weren't. They looked impressed. And worried. Double quotes, Ms. Bell, one of them began. Thank you for your cooperation, and especially for the clarity of your documentation. I nodded, waiting. We'd like to ask a few questions regarding how and when you came into possession of this footage. I gave them everything. Dates, times, when I bought the camera, why I bought it, when I began to suspect Jenna, how I stayed late one night after everyone had left and saw her hovering near my desk, how she flinched when she realized I was watching. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth, and it was enough. What I didn't expect was how fast it all moved afterward. That same afternoon, Jenna was called into a meeting. She didn't return. People started whispering again, but this time their words had a sharp edge. By the end of the day, someone from facilities was boxing up her desk. By the end of the week, her name was scrubbed from the internal directory. But the true explosion came when legal's report was finalized and distributed not just internally, but to regulatory authorities. Turns out Jenna's little stunt wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. She'd falsified evidence. She'd accessed confidential documents she wasn't cleared to see. Worst of all, she attempted to manipulate a compliance audit with the help of internal HR. Using her father's influence to orchestrate it, the company had no choice. She was fired with cause. Her father, one of the longest-standing board members, submitted his resignation quietly. Late one Friday evening, the firm tried to downplay it, releasing a vague internal memo about personal reasons. But people weren't stupid. The truth always has a way of spreading, and this time it spread like wildfire. Industry blogs picked it up. Anonymous sources, not me, leaked fragments of the report. Someone posted a photo of Jenna leaving the building with her cardboard box, and it became a meme on corporate TikTok. But it wasn't just Sean and Foya. People started reaching out to me, junior associates, who'd stayed silent for years. Admins who'd overheard things they were told to forget. Even a few senior partners who had brushed off Jenna's entitlement for too long sent me private messages. Thank you. You did what we should have done. We're sorry. And yet the apology I most expected never came. Not from Jenna. Not from her father. They disappeared into silence. the same silence they once relied on to shield them. But now that silence was isolating, damning me. I didn't celebrate. Not in the way people think. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't post a victory thread. I sat at my desk, looked out the window, and exhaled. I had survived. More than that, I had exposed a system built to protect itself and forced it to reckon with its rot. I didn't just send a video. I sent a message, and they heard it loud. Unmistakable. Final the day Jenna's fall became public. I was in the elevator with 2 junior analysts whispering in the corner. I wasn't trying to listen, but her name was impossible to miss. She's the reason we had to re-sign all those NDAs, one of them said, his voice tight with nerves. It's bigger than just her. Legal's freaking out. My supervisor said compliance is doing a retroactive audit on the whole department. And then I realized this wasn't over, not really. Jenna's fall was just the first domino. And it was falling loudly. The company tried to contain it, of course. They always do. They framed her termination in clinical language, breach of protocol, mishandling of sensitive information, and conduct unbecoming of her position. But no amount of sterile phrasing could bury what everyone had seen, what everyone had whispered about, what now had names, dates, and a face. She became the cautionary tale of the quarter. What started as hushed conversations in hallways turned into full-blown panic meetings. People began questioning everything. Who had access to what? Who had covered? For whom? Who had let her act with so much arrogance for so long? Suddenly, compliance wasn't just a department. It was a presence, haunting every interaction. Even people who hadn't liked me before now nodded at me in the hall, as if afraid I might be watching, recording, waiting, but I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I had already won. It wasn't just that she was gone. It was how she went. Her departure wasn't a quiet firing followed by a gracious exit and some vague future consulting gig. It was a full exposure, every lie she told, every document she'd forged, every employee she'd undermined with factional gossip. Her name became synonymous with manipulation, with implosion, with disgrace. There were rumors that she tried to claim wrongful termination, even hired an attorney. But her case never even made it past the first call. The company's lawyers shut it down with one phrase: "We have the footage." She had no idea I had recorded her trying to plant the file on my USB drawer. She thought she was being clever, entering at lunch, gloves on, wearing a neutral badge that wouldn't ping the system. But she forgot about the angle of the desk, camera, the timestamp, the reflection on the glass of my monitor that showed her exact movements. She also didn't know I had kept backups, encrypted copies, stored off site. Because when someone targets you that methodically, that obsessively, you stop trusting locks, you stop trusting policies, you start preparing for war. And when it came, I was ready, but maybe the loudest part of her fall wasn't what happened in the office. It was outside. The moment her father was forced to resign, the industry took notice. He was a name, respected, connected, feared. His removal sparked curiosity. People started digging. And when they found the internal review had been initiated by a junior executive, me, suddenly, I was the name they were saying. People began calling me brave, strategic, even ruthless, but I wasn't any of those things. I was just tired of being quiet. I was tired of working twice as hard for half the credit, of being polite while others stabbed me with sugar-coated smiles, of pretending that staying silent was the same as being strong. Jenna's fall wasn't just public. It was symbolic. It sent a message to every woman in the building who'd been told to let it go, to every junior employee who'd ever been gaslit by someone in power. To every HR email that ended in, "Let's all remember to be professional." Her fall said, "We're not afraid of your last name anymore." It said, "We're not going to smile and nod while you burn down people's careers." And maybe most importantly, it said, "You chose the wrong person to frame." Because I wasn't just someone who came back from lunch. I was someone who came back from being underestimated, from being ignored, from being labeled as the quiet one. And when I stood up, I made sure everyone heard it. They didn't even try to hide it at the time. That promotion was never supposed to be mine. It was Jenna's, unofficially promised. In every meeting, Every coffee chat she had with senior leadership, every networking dinner she flaunted in front of me like a golden ticket, I'd never be allowed to touch. She talked about it before the role even existed, called it her next step, said things like, when I take over that department or once I'm VP, I'll restructure the team. And everyone just nodded. They didn't care that I had more experience, but I handled the most volatile accounts, that I'd been mentoring new hires while she fumbled through her own projects, passing the hard parts down to me and polishing the results as our own to them. I was quiet, efficient, invisible to Jenna. I was a threat only when I became inconvenient. And that's when the sabotage began. But now, after everything unraveled, after the footage, the investigation, the resignation of her father, and the exposure of the network protecting her, now they looked at me differently. The official announcement came in an email, the kind sent out late on a Friday to avoid too much noise. We are pleased to share that Mia Taylor has accepted the role of Regional Strategy Director, effective immediately. That was it. No fanfare, no flowers, just a sentence. But I knew what it meant. It meant that every backdoor deal had collapsed, that every unfair advantage had turned radioactive. That merit, for once, had actually won. When I walked into my new office, the one that used to be hers in theory, I stood for a moment by the window and breathed. It still smelled like stress and ink and recycled air, but to me it smelled like justice. Not because I had taken anything from her, but because I had reclaimed what was mine all along. The team was awkward at first. No one knew how to greet. A few gave me the kind of smile that says, we're glad, but we're afraid to show it. Some avoided eye contact altogether, not sure if I was angry, bitter, or about to start purging everyone Jenna liked. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I didn't need to fire anyone or prove dominance. I just needed to lead, honestly, transparently, competently. And it turned out that's what people wanted in the weeks that followed. Projects picked up speed. Deadlines were met or beat. New hires stopped asking, is it okay to speak up? Because I made it clear their voices mattered. Meetings got shorter, more effective. I didn't tolerate whispering politics or fear-based silences. I kept my door open, my tone calm, my expectations high, and slowly the air changed. People started volunteering new ideas again. Collaboration returned. Laughter even slipped in during the afternoons. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a cleansing. A recalibration of what we allowed and what we didn't. And every day that went by without manipulation, without favoritism, felt like proof that I hadn't just survived something. I'd changed something. Still, there were whispers outside our department. Some tried to reduce it all to gossip. She only got it because of the scandal. Right place, right time. She weaponized a camera, but those comments never lasted long. They wilted when exposed to facts. My record, my resilience, my results. And deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't Jenna's promotion anymore. This wasn't about her at all. This was about all the times I'd stayed late while she drank wine with directors. All the meetings I prepared while she decorated her desk for another fake milestone. All the silent humiliations I swallowed because I thought being the bigger person meant staying quiet. But it doesn't. Sometimes, being the bigger person means speaking when no one wants to hear you. Sometimes it means filming what no one believes. Sometimes it means claiming the chair they told you would never be yours. That office was never hers. It was mine. She just got there first and mistook proximity for destiny. Now, I sat behind the desk with a purpose she never understood. Not power for the sake of control, but power as responsibility, as stewardship, as proof that surviving the storm doesn't just make you strong. It makes you capable of building something no one can tear down again. And every morning I unlock that door. I remind myself, this isn't the end of a story. It's just the part where I stop apologizing for being here. They used to say I was nice, quiet, low drama, a team player. The kind of woman who didn't stir the pot, didn't cause problems, didn't demand the spotlight. I never corrected them. Because I knew, long before anyone else did, that silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And sometimes it was survival. In those early days, I took my lunches alone in the break room, earbuds in, reheating leftovers while the others gathered in cliques, whispering and laughing over overpriced salads. I watched, listened, learned. People said things around me because they assumed I wasn't really there, not in the way that counted. That's the funny thing about being underestimated. You become invisible, and invisible people see everything. They never expected the quiet one to fight back. They never expected the woman who brought her own lunch in a dented Tupperware to be the one who dismantled a power structure held together by nepotism, gossip, and fear. But I did, not with yelling, not with threats, with evidence, with precision, with the unshakable calm of someone who has been gaslit so many times she could write a manual on surviving fluorescent-lit betrayals. After Jenna was fired, and the promotion was mine, things shifted. But the biggest change didn't happen in my title or paycheck. It happened in the way people looked at me. At first, it was fear, then curiosity, and finally, respect. One afternoon, a younger analyst knocked on my office door. She hovered in the doorway, unsure if she was interrupting. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I nodded. She sat, nervously twisting the strap of her bag. "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did, for showing that we don't have to play their game to win." Her voice cracked a little when she said it, and I saw myself in her. The way I used to be, doubtful, careful, just hoping not to get swallowed alive. That conversation wasn't rare. It started happening more often. New hires asking for mentorship. Colleagues opening up about injustices they'd experienced but never dared report. Managers admitting they'd looked the other way for too long. I wasn't just a case anymore. I was a turning point. I didn't ask to be one. But I didn't reject it either. I started a mentorship circle. Informal at first. Just coffee meets, check-ins, then more structured. Monthly sessions about boundaries, power dynamics, how to document subtle retaliation, how to protect yourself without losing your humanity. I called it Lunch with the Quiet One as a joke, but it stuck. And it grew. What they once mocked became the very thing that anchored a movement. And Jenna? She tried to sue, claimed wrongful termination, character assassination. Her case collapsed faster than her fabricated evidence. Her LinkedIn went dark. I heard she moved states. Started over, I wish her peace, truly, but not return. As for her father, he left the company with a hefty severance, but a shattered reputation. No longer on boards, no longer at the charity galas. The ones who protected him moved on, quietly, cowardly, as they always do. Sometimes people ask me, was it worth it? The risk? The attention? And I think about the day I came back from lunch and saw strangers digging through my life, the rage under my skin, the ache in my stomach, the fight I hadn't planned on picking but couldn't afford to walk away. From I think about the weight of staying silent. Then I look around at the team I've helped rebuild. The transparency, the laughter, the way no one hesitates before knocking on my door. Yes, it was worth it. Because now, the quiet one is the one running the room. Because now, the woman who once sat alone at lunch is the one who pulls up a chair. For others. Because now every file on my desk, every decision I make, every young professional who whispers, "I thought it was just me," they remind me of one thing. Power built on silence can be taken by noise, but power built on truth, that stays. So if you're ever in a place where they call you too soft, too polite, too reserved to fight back, smile and remember me. Because the quiet one, she changed everything.